Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Take a look at this clip from Davos, from the World Economic Forum, just recently. It's gone viral.
This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And, I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. It feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water, right?
Well, we are joined now from Utrecht in the Netherlands by the writer you heard there, Rutger Bregman. And we've just seen you there in that clip. Rutger, how were you received at Davos?
Well, not very well, to be honest.
No surprise.
I went back on Friday to Amsterdam, and I didn't expect much of it, actually. I was glad that I got to say what I wanted to say, but the response from the audience was quite aggressive, actually. There was a CFO from Yahoo who, really objected to my use of the indispensable word, the B word. Bullshit. But I...
No more of that, yep.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I went home and I thought, well, this is it. But then on Monday, it completely exploded. Didn't expect that.
Right. People might say, look, the rich are mobile, so are big corporations in terms of moving offices around. They have good tax advisors. Mm-hmm. Isn't it better, rather than talking about taxes and raising them in the way that you have done, to talk about promoting philanthropy?
No, obviously not. No, this kind of reasoning is exactly what got France the Yellow Vest movement. The arrogance of the global elite who say, oh, you know what, I'll just move somewhere else. People are really, really fed up with that. And, I've been trained as a historian, and what history teaches us is that, things can be very different. During the 50s and the 60s, we had way higher marginal tax rates for the rich, and we also had very high growth and innovation. So there's nothing inevitable here.
All right. Is he right, Claire?
Well, I actually we all enjoyed that clip. Somebody who kind of speaks straight to an audience that kind of hates it is always good. Although there's far too much self-flagellation going on at Davos. Since I can remember it, they all keep saying, everybody hates big business, we're doing wrong, we need to reform. So to a certain extent, I kind of fear that some of them might say, oh, yes, you're so right, how terrible. But the only thing I would disagree with you on, even though I admire the fact that it's gone viral, is that I don't think it's as simple as tax. And I don't think the options are tax or philanthropy, by the way. One of the things that I read a great article by a British MP, Graham Stringer, who basically said Philip Hammond, on the phone to all these big CEOs like Amazon, and what he could have done was said what you said, which is, why not pay the tax or, stop tax avoiding? But instead he said, oh, by the way, don't worry, we're going to take no deal off the table. In other words, kind of said the status quo prevails. And I think why Davos is such an affront to the Gilets jaunes and all the rest of it is because it basically tries to stick with no change. We're the ones in control, do as we say.
Would tax, though, changing the tax laws and tax rates and taxing the rich much more make a huge difference, Louise?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah,
I loved that quote. It's like being at a firefighters conference and nobody's talking about water. And oh my God, people do not pay tax, and then they want to actually set up a fund that's got their name attached to it, and they want to trot into Downing Street as a philanthropist. It drives me insane. I love philanthropists, incidentally, anybody watching this programme, and I will take any money anybody wants to donate any of the causes that I represent. But that said, you need both. And in British history, we've had both. We have a long tradition of philanthropy and we have a long tradition of taxation. And right now, again, it goes back to the earlier conversation. The public, we don't trust people in politics anymore. We certainly don't trust big businesses. And we don't like people that seem to actually, the kindness sense of, when you get up in the morning, all of you people down at Davos, do you actually care about the fact you're walking past a person on the street who is homeless? Or that a family that is actually suffering because of the crackers policy of universal credit, that actually they won't be able to, to get a job because of the universal credit. I think that probably as human beings they do. Do you help a person cross a road if they can't cross a road? Hopefully you do. Somewhere in the midst of this, it's got lost. And I feel it's particularly lost at the moment.
I mean, I was just going to say, Rutger, though, listening to Louise there saying people don't trust the government and politicians, what makes you think, then, that people want to trust them with more of their money to spend badly?
Yeah,
Good
that's
point.
the problem.
Rutger?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't think that this is a matter of being a left-wing or right-wing or whatever.
No, just generally,
I mean, this
though.
is basically about saving capitalism. Capitalism is a beast that you need to tame, and inequality is growing now at a pace that, you know, it's just not sustainable, and it's a social poison. There's overwhelming evidence that when inequality grows, you get hosts of social problems that you don't really want. So again, it's not really about being left or right wing or about whether you trust your politicians, yes or no. It's just about common sense. And I'm all for philanthropy, but pay your taxes first, and then tell me about all your wonderful plans. But start with paying your taxes.
I think that we know now in this country that the public, in my mind, if you think their support for spending more on the NHS, of course they think the NHS is also looking after their elderly parents, which of course it isn't, but nevertheless leave that to one side. You know, the public, I think, if you look at Ipsos Mori polling and various others, we do want a greater sense of kindness, and we do want people that are less fortunate than those of us that are sitting around this table not to be, you know, ground into the earth, really. And so I think I don't necessarily agree with the language that Rutger has just talked about to do with capitalism, because I want actually growth of jobs, I want growth of the economy, but I want the gap between the rich and the poor not to be quite so extreme. And I certainly don't want big businesses, just like, they need to do good, not do bad.
I mean, James, in the UK, the highest earning 1% pay 28% of all income tax, certainly estimated at that. Now, that is close to the highest ever level.
Yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily a good thing. But, I mean, look, the poorest 10% pay around 40% of their income in taxes, while the richest pay around 34%. So, I mean, there's obviously... these things aren't all balanced. We can come at it from different angles. I mean, what I think is... I mean, I agree with Rutger, so I'll pronounce it properly. I mean, he follows in good steps. John McDonnell made a similar case when he was in Davos. He said almost the same about the rich need to pay taxes as well as get involved in philanthropy.
Does John McDonnell want to save capitalism?
I think... I mean...
Yes or no?
I think he's a socialist, so he wants to have a socialist economy.
But does he want to save capitalism? Is that at the heart of what he would be offering people if...
I think he wants a Labour government first and to have, you know, well-funded public services. But, I mean, on the serious issue that we are talking about, I mean... Look, I think when it comes to... Take Amazon, we talked about that, someone mentioned before, the story out today, they've paid £60 million in the last 20 years, yet they've had £7 billion of revenue. I mean, that's clearly not fair. Put that into Debenhams, not exactly a company doing very well, who paid from 2005 about 300 million in tax. There's clearly something not right. The government have overpromised and underdelivered all their tax avoidance schemes they put down. They never get anywhere near the money they promised to raise. But one last point, we are not collecting the tax, and if we carry on the way we're going, according to the latest Treasury figures out only the other day, if we go on what the Chancellor wants to do, which is to reduce corporation tax in April next year, we'll see £6 billion that is not collected and does not go in to paying for many of the schemes that undermine people who are upset about things like Brexit.
And that will be very popular. Let's just show... if we can, to viewers, the front page of the Daily Mirror, because it's been talking about precisely this issue of tax agreements. Amazon has paid less tax in Britain over 20 years than M&S paid in just one. So when will someone finally stand up to them and end this? Is it possible to do that sort of unilaterally? Obviously, yes, when it comes to paying tax in Britain, but people have always said it's better if there are global agreements.
It's obviously better if there are global agreements, but this is important and it's corrosive. You think about how much of our politics in Britain at the moment basically concerns itself with an obsession with this idea of an elite. This is what the elite is. The elite isn't people in North London who know how to pronounce quinoa. You know, the elite is Davos. The elite is global money that moves around and doesn't pay its way anywhere. Go all the way back to Peter Mandelson talking in the 90s about being intensely relaxed about people getting filthy rich so long as they pay their taxes. That's broken because these days the companies that get filthy rich, they move around and they don't pay their tax in Britain. That's the Amazon story. It's really important. It's important.
I'm going to just go back to
the fabric of our society.
Rutger, do you want to respond?
Well, it's relatively easy to do something about this. So, you know, I live in Holland, which is one of the major tax paradises in the world, right? So if you look at American companies, they've got about $500 billion stashed here. Are we the most powerful country in the world? Do we have the largest army in the world? Obviously not. If the US and Europe together would say, OK, now it's finished, stop doing this, we'll be like, OK, it would be immediately be finished. So this is really a matter of political will. It's not like people say, oh, inequality, it's the consequence of globalization and of technology and it's inevitable. We can't do anything about it. That's absolute nonsense. There's
Who are you
a new
impersonating
generation.
then, Rutger, I wonder? Stay with us, because we're going to move on and talk about rough sleeping, which was mentioned at the top of the programme, and also because our guest here, Louise, was the homelessness czar and actually managed to eliminate rough sleeping, or certainly bring it to very low figures. Now, if you're, looking outside at the weather at the moment, it is terrible for people sleeping rough. Some of those higher taxes you talked about, would you put it straight into dealing with rough sleeping?
Yes, I would. I mean, I definitely would. I think it's just an extraordinary disgrace in the United Kingdom that the numbers are as high as they are. We got pretty close to making sure there was a very significant difference in terms of the numbers of people that were forced to sleep on the streets, and I think we could do it again, but it would take a determination of government.
More than £100 million, which is what's been offered by the government.
It has, and, that'll help, but the issue is it's not... Look at the numbers. I mean, honestly, Joe, it's extraordinary.
4,677 people a night are sleeping rough on the streets of England.
Numbers are up in Manchester City. Numbers are up in Birmingham. Numbers are coming out in places like Corby and Mansfield. Numbers are up in London. So I think that it would take a concerted effort across government. My hope when Theresa May went back into Downing Street and said the burning injustices, I was waiting for the call, thinking, here we go, let's get the numbers sorted, let's get back out on the streets and let's make sure that we don't have people dying on the streets.
If she called you, would you go back in and help?
Oh, good God, I didn't know you were going to ask me that question.
All right, I'll do it. You think about it,
I'll think on.
Say yes if she calls, because you might have a chance,
would,
right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's very interesting because it relates to what we've just been talking about. I think philanthropy is incredibly important when it comes to homelessness, or let's put it this way. The first job I ever had was working with the Cyrenians in Coventry, and homelessness and rough sleeping, it's kind of like all of my adult life being concerned about it. Yeah, stays with you. And charities do fantastic things. I want more shelters. I want all of that kind of thing. And people should give to charities and help them and so on. But it's not enough. That was what I was going to say.
Exactly.
But is it a substitute? Is it that what you're saying?
No, I'm not. No. What I was going to say was, but however, we do need... This is one of the things why I don't think it's just tax, by the way. What I'd want is also big business investing so that we... I mean, they're actually sitting on their hands and not even investing. They're not even creating dynamic economies, jobs, houses. I mean, we need a revolution in the construction industry, for example. We need to actually go out and build houses. So, although I want to deal immediately with rough sleeping because it's a tragedy, I also think we need to have more going on. The worst thing for me, though, is I've been writing about local government for some years. Councils of Labour and Tory councils have used homelessness spikes, driving homelessness people off the streets. There's been a huge amount of energy dealing with homelessness.
Well,
Get them out of sight. I mean, how disgusting is that? So it's not just money.
OK, hang on.
Just really, the key thing here is you have to do structural and you have to do personal. So, of course, there needs to be immediate relief for people on the streets. But the thing that we did from 1999 onwards was look at why people were ending up on the streets in the first place, which is about making sure there is enough housing, making sure you get a good route for kids coming out of care, making sure that you stop the terrible cycle of coming out of prison and going back out onto the streets. So you have to prevent homelessness as well as dealing with what's happening there. And the government haven't focused enough, in my view, on those harder aspects to do.
Let me go back briefly to Rutger. What do you think the chances are of people taking on your mantra?
Well, I'm really part of a new generation, I think. If you look at what's happening now in the US, where, young congresswomen like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has recently proposed a top marginal tax rate of 70%. Just as we had in the 50s and the 60s. You now have Elizabeth Warren with her new plan for a wealth tax. I think 10 years ago, it would have been unimaginable for a historian to go viral with the one-liner, taxes, taxes, taxes.
All right.
But here I am.
OK, Rutger, thank you very much there in Utrecht. And I'm going to apologise on his behalf for the bad language because we have complaints on Twitter. Apologies for that.